Culture Club show back.
We are back. Somebody asked me. Somebody every time we
What
miss
is that
every time we
sound
miss a
effect?
week, every time you
Yeah.
miss a week, I have at least one or two friends that are like, "Yo, where's the show?" So I also want to give a quick shout out to people that do listen to us weekly because it really doesn't mean a lot when you notice that we take that unfortunate week off. But glad to be back. Ben Dietz and Jeff Carvalho. That's me. Ben, you're in Cali right now.
I'm in
Um,
Borrego Springs, California. Windy
and
Borrego Springs, California.
how's the weather out there?
Aside from the fact that the wind is blowing at like tropical storm levels, it's beautiful.
Amazing. I just want to say I know you're out there for family matters, and we all love you, Ben, and
Oh, thank you.
we wish you the best tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. It's my mother passed away recently, and so this is a celebration of her life happening on Sunday. So that's what we were out here
Super.
for. But thank you, I appreciate it. I
All
appreciate
right,
it.
listen, we've had a while you've been in Cali. I don't know, man. This week has been, I think, one of the most fun in terms of thinking about AI maybe breaking through with the masses. Love to get into the story with you, Ben, on writing.
Okay, it's funny you should say that because I kind of wanted to go into this in a slightly different fashion.
Please do.
Okay, so this morning it was, or yeah, I guess yesterday it was announced, today it was reported that the University of Maryland is having Kermit the Frog speak at its university commencement. So students that have spent 4 years readying themselves for the professional world are going to be sent off on their way by the benediction of a frog that is not only, A, not a real person, B, basically a cartoon, and C, a piece of embodied IP owned by Paramount, maybe, or Disney. I don't
Is
really
it
know,
is
but
it Disney? Let me look it up.
I don't know. But in any case, I just find it very strange, but I think it's an interesting contrast to the way in which cultural influence has been flattened to the point where fictional characters can be real influences in this way, and that
Yeah.
that then dovetails into the Studio Ghibli style animations that took over ChatGPT yesterday, and basically, according to Sam Altman, melted ChatGPT's servers. So that I find very interesting. It's like this: we are venerating cartoon characters to the point that we're sending our next generations off into the world with their wisdom, and also that we are, at the end of the day, just using this very advanced technology to create cute pictures of Sam Altman as a twink or Bernie Sanders as a sad Japanese man wearing mittens.
Totally.
Anyway, Jeff,
Totally.
that was my no, that was just, I find it odd.
When you sent me both of these links at the same time, I actually was not thinking about the connection on the same wavelength, but I get it. I think with starting with Kermit, it's interesting. Who would you rather? Let me ask you this: which fictional character would you rather give
That's my
an address to?
point.
Hold on, I know none. I know none, but please play with me on this one.
Okay.
Would you rather have like a Kermit the Frog, or would you rather have, I don't know, um, a Count Dracula or something from a cereal box? There is
That's Count
it's it.
Chocula, just to be
Oh,
clear.
excuse me, Count Chocula. My point in
It's
saying this,
totally
which
different
by the
advice.
way, as a child, straight up, as a child, I used to have a recurring dream that Count Chocula and his pointy-toed boots were stomping on my mom. I'm not even making this up. I used to recurring dream with Count Chocula.
Well,
But
it's like a
anyway,
portmanteau of the Wizard of Oz and Count Chocula. That's wow. That's wild.
anyway, listen, I think that the one thing
Hobnail
that I
boots.
have learned the one thing
Hobnail
that I
boots.
have learned was when we put little Michaela, who was arguably, not the first digital influencer, but she was peak digital influencer where she came out.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if you
for sure.
remember Michaela, when she popped off, there was a big conversation at that time talking about, you know, does it need to be real? Like, does the messenger that's wrapping up the message have to be real? And what you found, at least with Michaela, was that within the comments, people didn't necessarily care that she was not real or real in terms of, quite frankly, the younger generation. So we're
Sure.
talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
Gen Z at that time,
yeah, yeah.
right? And I mean, we're just getting closer and closer to that. So why not Kermit the Frog to give this moment? A guy who has lived through many lives. He took over Manhattan twice. Like there's, on a serious,
Don't get me wrong. We watch him as Bob Cratchit in A Christmas Carol every year
also great.
religiously.
But I
But
do
I
think,
guess go for it. Yeah.
I just want to say this. I do think that I'm more curious as to who's going to write the message behind it, right? Is it
Mm.
going to come off as the Kermit that we have seen? I mean, Kermit the Frog has shown up in interviews publicly, but like, what Kermit are we going to get from it? Now, with that said, I firmly believe there's essentially no other character that you could bring on stage to give such a keynote. I don't know what other. I can't think of anything. My mind, by the way, is immediately going to triumph the insult comic dog and Schmeigel and what Schmeigel would do with this thing. Oh my
Well,
God, I would love that.
that to me is the issue with it. Like we've gotten to the point now where, I'm presuming here, but like clearly you're not going to get red pilled Kermit up there, right? Like new Kermit now with Trump is not happening. Um, by the same token, you're not going to get a like a left pill, like Kermit now with Bernie Sanders isn't going to happen either. And so the thing to me is, it's like, okay, what we're doing is we are using this avatar to signal the fact that polarity has gotten so extreme that we can't have anybody who could potentially be construed to one side or the left. So we have to just take this really
That's
anodyne
fantastic. That
figure in the middle.
wow.
And that's really dangerous because that means like we are regressing to the mean on everything, including this very important send-off moment for the next generation of
Great
business
point.
leaders, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing that worries me about it. The other thing that uh, I just find odd as like a, let's call it, student of brand management, is that the Maryland mascot is the terrapin. It's a turtle. Turtles eat frogs. Like, why would the frog put himself there like that? That's
And maybe
just, I
the
mean,
frog will
clear.
come. Maybe he'll come with a
It's
security.
it's a total sellout move on the part of the Frog Corporation, whomever it is. By the way, this reminds me. The other thing that it reminded me of when I read this was because in the New York Times article it talks all about like this uplifting message Kermit's going to give, and the president of the university is like, "There's no better person to give us an uplifting message than Kermit." I'm just like, it's total brain rot, infecting the highest levels of our, you know, ideological development machine. But it made me think of a photo that I saw recently on Hamburger Eyes of a movie where
Hamburger eyes.
Ray Potes had he took a picture of a two frogmen on the screen, and in sort of Gen Z fashion, captions on the screen said "both speaking frog," and I love the photo, and I almost bought a print of it. But then I was like, Marcella will absolutely never let me put this picture up anywhere. So
So much of that art.
I, it's anyway, those prints, which are on Hamburger Eyes, which is the next topic. So Hamburger Eyes, long-standing black and white based photography magazine out of San Francisco, started by Dave and Ray Potes brothers, and then has incubated hundreds of young photographers, and some of whom have become big names, some of whom have remained relatively anonymous. But they're doing a print sale right now to raise money for the next issue, and they're selling like essentially cheap prints for $30 a piece. Now, I don't know why they're doing that, because I think $30 is way too cheap for art objects, but I love the fact that they're getting in there to, make an offer. And there's a bunch of cool photos, and so, I bought a few. I didn't buy the two both speaking frog one, but somebody else did, so all good.
I love it. I was introduced to Hamburger Eyes, I think, during the MoMA book fair some time ago
Oh
when I
yeah, sure,
moved.
sure.
Um, Fantastic. I want to go back to this
Amazing. Which
Kermit thing
which should
for.
be coming.
Hmm?
That should be coming up in like April. We should mark our calendars for that. I think
Yeah,
that
which by the way,
I
I have
think
to
that's in
go. I've
April.
missed. 3 years in a row. And I've been told LA's interesting. Just on a quick aside, I feel like I have things that I could sell at the book fair. Not just zines that I'm working on, but just like the amount of shit
Jeff,
ephemeralized.
w- w- I wrote about this in the newsletter yesterday, but Chris Corrado showed me his copy of the A New York Thing backdoor book
Yes, I
on
saw that.
Tuesday,
Super cool.
which was just like, whoa, I'd completely forgotten about it, but it's just that thing is so amazing. And I know your archive is just full of things like that, where if you brought them to market at a MoMA book fair or whatever, it would be, people would light up. They'd light right up, Jeff.
I know they would. Just to talk about Kermit for one quick second, because
Okay.
it's super important. And then I want to go back to the book fair.
Okay.
And you're nailing something that I'd love to talk about for a quick second. I think you're absolutely right. Like we're making this almost like sterile version. Like you're almost looking for a sterile version of someone to have a conversation with you. And I wonder if part of that, and I wonder if you have this as well, I wonder if a part of that is literally just fatigue. You know, I can't even listen to the Daily anymore because they can't not do an episode about a
Oh
Trump
yeah, yeah.
a Trump fiasco or not. And
Well,
I
yeah, yes, and it has also become, it's down to like DNA at this point. Like the minute you hear those voices and just their intonation, you know that it's going to be about
it's going to be
some
bad or good, right?
left complaining about the right situation, and it's not helpful because you just immediately like, oh, I can't listen to this anymore. I'm going to turn it
Exhaustion,
off.
dude.
Even
You
though the
know,
stuff that they're talking about is really important, they just like the medium becomes the message. To shout out to
well,
our boy McLuhan.
listen. I'm interested to see what Kermit says. It'll be something, and I'd love for us to talk about it again next week.
Okay, well, I don't
On
think
that note,
we got to wait for them to graduate and then we'll know what he says. That'll be in like
shit,
mid-May.
that is it won't be next week. You're right. It'll be closer to April or May.
Mid-May.
But on that note of, real versus not real, let's talk about what ChatGPT released this week with their new engine. I know you've got a lot to say about it. Before we talk about it, I want to put this into the ether. Are they being incredibly marketing and strategic in specifically showing us how we can turn ourselves into these animations, into a variety of different things? And because I actually watched, and to step back, ChatGPT launched a pretty epic update to their image generator AI. I
Right.
don't think it's actually connected to DALL-E, but it's able to kick out some pretty good imagery based on very little prompts. That was something that I always loved about Midjourney, which is, in my opinion,
Right.
probably the leader in AI generation. Um, but to market it in such a way that we look at it to be used to build memes, I think is pretty genius. I think they need to figure out ways to connect, the technology to everyday uses, and this one's an easy one.
Right. Well, yes, agree. I guess I get a little concerned about that because it caters to our basest nature, which is just like, how do you make a lulz moment out of this
Totally.
thing?
Which is what we've become in some way.
Uh,
Not
uh,
you and
uh,
I.
w- well, no, but a certain kind of Western culture, a certain kind of like affluent first world culture has become that. Like, let's chase laws and let's ignore the heavy stuff for this sort of like shiny bright object in the foreground. That's a little worrying because to me it's like, all right, well, what do we? How do we end up really solving problems when we're constantly distracted by the latest little lulls moment? But in any case, I mean, look, I think we'll
But Ben,
figure it
is it a
out.
gateway into it? Like, okay, this is your
Well,
first step.
yeah, but that's kind of my point. It's like when everything is profoundly unserious, then serious things can't be addressed because there's no language to address them.
Sure.
That's
On the other side
that's
of
where I
this
worry.
too, it, on the other side of it, beyond what we're not seeing, there is some sort of conformity in this. Like it's amazing how quick we all want to have that. In the case of the variety story, the studio Ghibli takes, of course, and it's so interesting how like we all having fun with it, and we all want to share it as well. And to me, I- that uniformity in the way we responded to it kind of, I don't know, it dissuades me a little bit
From what?
from again to the point you're making, like taking things seriously in some way. Like I know we can have fun with it, we can show it, but come on, let's do something even more interesting. The tool is there. um then again, we
Yeah,
all want to be part of, Spirited Away, I guess, in some very
yeah, I guess
soft
so.
and calming.
It's funny you should say that, because my immediate response to your saying it dissuades you from taking things seriously is like, right, the propaganda is working, and then that turns on this emotion of like, well, where does the propaganda come from? Who controls the propaganda? So on and so forth. It takes me to this point where it's like, okay, well, especially with Trump having cut the funding for Voice of America and a lot of the kind of um, pro-American national broadcasts and media generation that has been happening for the past 70 years or more around the world. We're going, okay, we're going to cut back on the government doing that with an intention and with a message, and we're going to just let the corpse have it. And if that means that Studio Ghibli becomes the sort of de facto Voice of America going forward, which is a sort of a bizarre construct in and of itself, but then okay, cool, like let it happen. That creates a really potentially worrisome dynamic, because it means that the decision making about all of this messaging gets left in the hands of a few small people.
If I'm hearing
Not
you
a
correct,
revelation,
Ben,
right? This is the same
right,
critique as Musk in the White House, but it's another example of it.
right. If I'm reading you correctly, you know, the the comical use of technology is sort of taking us away from bigger picture problems that we have.
Well, just it's a way to abdicate our responsibility for leadership and guidance
I
by going
got it.
like, oh, you guys figure it out, and here's a cute way to do it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really concerned up there, Ben. And
I'm
by the
not.
way,
I
I
mean,
love it.
well, no, I struggle because I walk both sides of the line on this. It's like my job in many respects is to think about how do we hack these dynamics to create stories that cut through, right? And so I'm
Totally.
constantly thinking about that. And on the other hand, I'm constantly thinking about like, okay, well, if in 2 years when Campbell graduates from college, Animal from the Muppet Show is his commencement speaker, and he's just doing, ah,
That'd be
it's like,
sick.
it,
With a
see,
script.
the animal doesn't use words. There would be no script, and yet it would be sick, right? The internet would go nuts. It would be. There's a logic
Yeah.
to it. That's
Even
that
I have to
is.
admit it'd be fun, but you're right. Like the purpose is we we are listen, you what I love about talking to you, Ben, more than anything is first of all, you're just more well read than anybody I know. But second, you're in New York, right? So your perspective of this is so different than what
Hmm.
I'm seeing in
Hmm.
Miami. In
Hmm.
fact, if
Hmm.
I can add, politically, I feel very progressive. Even though I probably get killed by most progressives for driving a Model Y, which I think is, it's put me in this weird place. But the what's interesting to me is that the people around the school, not so much the creatives that come to Breakfast Club, but you know,
Hmm.
people in general, they almost assume that you sitting in front of them has the same exact view as them. I think that to me is really interesting here, where they just assume because your kids go to a specific school or you run in specific circles that
Right. There's
you
a
you you know you agree to everything. And I that has been an interesting line for me to kind of run, where I'm like, you know,
right. Right.
you know.
Interesting.
So I know for sure from being down here that there are people that absolutely just don't care what's happening outside of Florida. Like that's what they're doing. And that's dangerous too. And by the way, I'm not.
Yeah.
There's plenty of Democrats in Florida. Maybe not. I mean, we need a few more, but there's definitely people that are thinking about things, but I just feel like things just get shut down a lot quicker these days, right?
Oh yeah,
So if
100%.
if OpenAI came out and said, "Hey, look, we just made an amazing generator here. We can generate any images," and I don't know, like people can. And by the way, one thing I noticed about the image generator is that it
Mm.
does not allow me to prompt it with any proper brand names or words. So, as an example, trying to make a I tried to make a cover. I have it right here in front of me. I wrote, "Make me a dog looking at the sky with the word dog and serif above it." It worked. The first time I did it, I asked it to give me the Time magazine font, and it was like, "Yeah, we can't do that." So that actually bothers me a little bit from the technology because I'm like, "What the fuck? I'm using I guess, a non-commercial license, so give me some shit to use, you know?" Um,
Yeah, well, I
but
mean, that actually brings up, and I'm just pulling up the variety thing because I actually don't know what the deal is, but I'm just trying to figure out, did OpenAI make a deal with Studio Ghibli to use its
that's a great
animation?
question. Let me ask.
Because I mean, it talks about how Miyazaki has who is the co-founder of Studio Ghibli has expressed strong disapproval of AI generated
That's right.
animation. And so it doesn't seem like Studio Ghibli would have
I
made a
think the
deal
quote
to
was even
do this.
harsher than that.
But but by the same token, like but this also it's a obviously like a massive brand builder for Studio Ghibli as a, in terms of as having
Yeah, but they're
signature style,
Japanese.
in
They'll
terms
never
of
see
being
it that way. You know,
well, that's why I'm asking the question. It's just so
so they are not. There is no formal agreement. And the quote that you're talking about from Miyazaki, I'll read it here. It says, "Quote, I am utterly disgusted. I would never wish to incorporate this technology into my work at all." He further said, "I strongly feel that this is an insult to life itself." In the most sweeping of terms, people memeing themselves after his work is an insult,
yeah, oh,
But I agree
100%.
with him.
Well, and but that's it. It's like what what the GPT ought to return when you say, do Bernie Sanders sitting on a bench in the cold wearing mittens. It ought to return, sorry, I can't replicate Bernie Sanders, and sorry, I can't replicate Studio Ghibli style. Um, but here's another picture of an old guy. Well, I'm saying it should, but it doesn't because they haven't worked out the rights to use Studio Ghibli's trademark style. Now, the problem is Studio Ghibli's style is style. It's not necessarily trademarkable. It's recognizable, but not necessarily trademarkable. I don't know. I just find the whole thing it's fascinating, but it's also,
I just, I
you
just,
know,
I just, I
worrying.
just prompted it similar to yours, and I asked it, "Show me a photo of Bernie Sanders." I'm not even asking it to generate, but it assumed I wanted a generation, and it did tell me I can't display or generate real photos of public figures. However, you can find official images of him on reputable news sites or his official U.S. Senate
Dude,
page.
that's a fantastic. That's actually a really fantastic little like
It is.
self-own. You can find them on reputable sites,
I mean,
not like the one you're on right now.
how cool is that? How cool is
That's
it? It's almost telling me to like check your head. Make sure there's no fake
God.
photo of
I
him
mean,
sitting at the inauguration.
look, yeah, but I mean, think about where that leads us to. It's like, do your own research. Okay, RFK in the White House. Thanks, guys. Well done.
That one's a bonkers, but I don't want to talk about that. But back to Bernie, by the way. When Bernie was photoed sitting in that chair during, I think it Biden's? It was Biden's
Biden's
inauguration.
inauguration, yeah.
Tops, the trading card company, has this speedy line called Tops Now, where they release cards based on major events in sports, and they started to
Yeah.
do world events, and that card trended. And the cool thing about Tops Now is that it's basically made to order. I think they sold something like 50,000 of that Bernie Sanders cards. People going ape for it, which I thought
Well,
was quite
you
interesting.
know, it's funny, Jeff. I went to the opening of the Gordon Matta Clark photo exhibition that Roger Gassman and Beyond the Streets
Set up.
organized 2 Fridays ago. And So Gordon Matta Clark is the Soho pioneer, artist, and photographer. But he took a lot of early photos, or he took photos of a lot of early New York City subway graffiti in particular. Names like Lee and Crash and Snake and Doze and the the guys who paved the way, Futura of course, who paved the way for what has become graffiti, the international art form. The show was kind of amazing because a like I went with my buddy Mike Klein, my buddy Brandon Hoy, and my buddy Ben Pruce, all of us touching 50, if not slightly past it, and we were like the youngest people in the room. It was crazy. There was like all of these graffiti OGs, like 70-year-old graffiti OGs, all of whom were embracing each other with the enthusiasm of teenagers. It was kind of amazing. But one of the people that I ran into was Eric Foss, the artist, who of course has a past life as the owner of Lit, the bar and nightclub in the East Village, and just sort of like downtown creative culture eminence. I ran into Eric. I'm talking to Eric, and a guy walks up with a card and hands it to Eric and says, "Hey, will you sign this?" And it turns out somebody made art cards of Eric's work someplace, and the guy was getting him to sign it. My question to you is, as a
And Eric
card
hadn't seen it.
enthusiast, Eric was aware of it, but had not seen the physical. It was the first one he had ever physically seen, and so he signed it, and whatever. And now the guy put it back in his like plastic thing, and now he's got a
He did.
super delicious
Yeah,
mint,
that's very collectible.
go get it graded type thing. But I guess my question to you as a card enthusiast is like, are we going to turn every moment in culture into a thing that gets memorialized through that kind of physical object by virtue of customizable, create your own card situations? Have we already
Such a
reached that
great
point and I'm
question.
just not aware of it?
I think we are at a place where it's not necessarily about cards, but we want to memorialize something and
Hmm.
have a piece of it. So, like as an example, I, you know, one thing I've been doing, I think I've talked about it on the show. I've been essentially buying art pieces or touch points of different artists I love, and you know that as they're getting starting to age, I'm starting to age, and I found this one of Peter Laird, and this
Oh
is
my
Peter
God.
Laird of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fame, and
Hold
it's
on.
exactly like you're saying.
Keep that up on this. I gotta say, I'm gonna take a picture of this.
Yeah,
That's
go
so
ahead. So this is
funny.
a
I did.
I'm
Okay,
showing
great.
a PSA, which is
I
a
need that
grading
for a
company
meeting.
slab. Yeah, I mean, so actually, the main reason I bought this,
Hmm.
Ben,
Yeah,
the reason I paid a little extra to get it graded, which by the way, we can talk about grading later, is because it's authenticated, right? So like an average
yeah.
card like this, I don't want to sort of shoot the moon and see if I hit correct or not. So the encapsulation of this, and by the way, to the point you make, there are people encapsulating video games. The video game
Yeah.
market is through the roof. The VHS market's through the roof, and now iPod. So yes, eventually everything gets immortalized. Greg Mishka, I always call him Greg Mishka, but Greg Rivera, from Greg's Fun Shop
From
in the
and
auction I
Mishka,
showed you,
Mishka back in the day. Yeah, yeah.
for sure from Mishka back in the day, and I think still with Mishka, if I'm not mistaken. You know, Greg's an example of a guy who hunts for these things, and you know, he's finding them. And it's funny enough, the the thing I keep thinking about is rave flyers because I have so. In fact, shout out to
Yeah, yeah.
Ami Kialoha who just sent me about probably 300 New York rave flyers from 1999 to about 2000. I'm pretty sure I have a complete Twilo run and a complete
Whoa.
Limelight run, which is cool.
Wow.
So how
That's
do I
cool.
go about? It's gonna sit in my closet. It does nothing. So like, quite frankly, it's one of the reasons why I started to write again. Is like, how do we begin to get these stories out there? And part of it, if I can be honest, is to bring more attention to it so that people start to see a little bit more value in this. Now, for you, Ben, to me, this would never live in your house, right? You're a band that puts all of his art in in
I've
frames.
I've put all of my art in non-dom storage
Yeah, this looks
facilities.
ridiculous. This
like
looks
beyond
ridiculous.
passport control.
Like, I don't even know how to frame it, but nostalgia is nostalgia, dude.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
for
different,
sure.
I guess, than us
It
buying records.
Yeah, I mean that the way you do that, right, is you put that into a salon style framing with lots of other unlike objects so that it tells a magazine style story of many different, inputs and influences. Um,
Yeah. And so the answer to me is I love the collectability of things, but um, I'm looking for things that are closer to my heart, and it may not be that. One last slide I want to
yeah,
show you, Ben. This is Mira Andreeva, who just won Dubai Open. She's a tennis pro from Russia, and this is
okay.
an example
Guys,
of
so
something that,
by the way, guys, if you're not watching this, so Jeff is holding up a card in plastic with of a tennis player that
yeah, she's
appears to be signed here.
number,
Yeah, so
yeah, I think she's number 12 in the world, and short of being able to go and get it signed, my daughter's into this. My daughter plays tennis. Mira lost, unfortunately, in Miami, but I think she's going to take Roland Garros. It's like, she can at least hold something that she signed, right? In this case, it's like a sticker that gets plastered onto a card, but I don't know. I think you raise a good
well,
question. Like, when do we
to,
stop?
to well, but it also what makes me think we've hit our half hour, so we're gonna have to jump. But what it reminds me of is so like I said, I'm here for a weekend that memorializes my mom and her life. And one of the things we did was go through old photos, and it made me realize that we we printed a lot of photos of the kids up until around 2010, and then we have totally stopped. And we have zillions of them, but they are not printed. And so the exactly
Yeah.
to your point about the cards, in a culture that moves at literal hyperspeed, information bombards us at all times. The need to have something to hold on to kind of re-trigger a memory and bring us back to the moment that it happened is
Hmm.
super, super important and a very human thing. And in the absence of the photographs of yore or the books of yore or whatever the case is, we default to whatever the nearest object is. And if that nearest object is a baseball card or a little signed napkin or whatever it is, then great, that's going to be the thing.
Or your phone, Ben. And I think you make a great point. 2000, like, something happened where we're not physical anymore. Yeah, we can print our photos, but what
Well, but
happens to this generation that doesn't have a concert ticket stub? How are you
yeah,
going to remember that show you went to today? It's on
by
your
the
Instagram
way,
feed, I
well,
guess.
speaking of, I found in that pile of photos, a I found a ticket to Madonna at the Roseland in 1999, a show that I do not remember going to.
Sick. Madonna's hot collectability. Hot
So,
collectability.
so I was just like, okay, cool. There we go.
Ben, you
Got
can
it.
take that ticket, send it to PSA, and they will slab it just like this. And they'll give it a nice little grade and confirm that it's a real ticket. That's actually a massive market, believe it or not. No, on a serious note, Madonna,
I no, no, no. I believe it. I believe it.
anything
I
Madonna's
believe it.
crazy hot.
I totally
Um,
believe it.
Ben, we've gone through a good half hour today on Friday. Awesome to catch up. Thank you to
Yes,
everyone for
indeed.
listening to um, Culture
Culture Club
Club
show.
Show. I was about to say Breakfast Club, but Breakfast Club is, of
You
course,
can't
going.
listen. You can't listen to Breakfast Club yet. Soon,
Can't listen to
maybe.
Breakfast Club. I just want to do a quick promo. I've started writing again, Ben, for the first, I think it's the first thing I've written in maybe 4 years, to be honest.
Yeah,
Um, Selectism.substack.com. I would love a follow, a lot more to talk about on that and in the future, but
yeah. I've always loved that brand, Jeff. I'm so glad to see it back.
I do too. I do too. And, the good thing is that we're essentially able to get that brand. And
Dude,
let's
I
see what we're
love
going
it.
to do. It'll be fun. I actually would love to hear a long form from you on some mundane things as well, but we'll talk about that
Okay,
later.
all right. That sounds good.
Give us a follow on Spotify, wherever you're listening to this. Leave us a show note. Ben, I hope you have a fantastic weekend and best to you
Thank
and
you,
your
Jeff.
family.
Thank you. Likewise.
All right, guys.
Talk next week. Bye.